Welcome to the Abundance Mindset Podcast, where we equip people with free financial education to help them level up their finance IQ and make better decisions for them and their families. Today, we're talking about something that affects many, many people in the United States, which is the 401k. We have heard so many questions and seen so many mistakes that fall into similar patterns and just similar misconceptions. So we're going to do an episode today that is all about busting the myths on the things that you might be believing about your 401k that just are not true.
Yep. And we have a couple more in-depth 401k episodes, multiple actually, if you go back and listen. But this is just, some quick hits, right? Because the 401k is just a piece in your financial plan. It's a piece. But it's one of the parts that you really can miss out on a lot of efficiencies. There's so much value to be had when you start to understand what is available to you in your 401k. And there's just questions that you should ask.
Yeah.
Right. So we're going to just buzz through some of those questions. This is an easy conversation for us because typically, the person we're in front of, they have a 401k. And so it's again a part of the plan, and we look at a lot of them, and even employer to employer, it's a really great tool. Some might have more features than others, but in general, there's just so many mistakes that don't have to be made. So I hope this episode really, really helps you as you try to, make every piece of your financial plan as efficient as possible.
Totally. And, we've said things like this before, but in case we sound dismissive, it's not that we are. We're working with really smart people, but if it's not your job to know, details about your 401k, you're probably not going to know details about your 401k. And so we just run into these things a lot where smart, thoughtful people just don't really know what's going on, and they're making these common mistakes that we're going to talk about today. Oftentimes, all of them all at once.
Yeah, exactly. Or just even, looking at it, right? Sometimes you just set it up and never look at it again. Where what if your employer just rolled out some new funds in your 401k? What if your employer started giving you the ability to match in Roth, or contribute in a different way, or opened up a mega backdoor? There's so many things that, again, if this is not your job, well, hopefully you're listening to this podcast and it can help you.
Yeah. But even just reflecting as a former corporate guy, like my employer wasn't giving me brownie points for digging around and figuring out what my 401k is doing. And not that they're discouraging financial literacy, but like, I think sometimes now that we're not in that world, we can fail to remember and imagine that, like, when you show up at work, you're not thinking, how can I optimize my 401k? You're thinking, oh, this email, oh, this meeting, oh, this priority, oh, I've got my review next week, right? Like, your job is not to know this stuff. And so oftentimes people simply don't. I can still remember acutely all the things I didn't know about my 401k when you were already running this business, but I hadn't yet joined, and I was still in that kind of, corporate day-to-day where I wasn't paid to know much about my 401k, and so I didn't.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyways, without further ado, let's get into the common misconceptions or mistakes that people make.
Yeah, I think, in no particular order, the first that comes to mind is just looking to see if you have pre-tax or Roth for your options and how you can contribute, and then what's best, right? Depending on your income, what happens to you in your financial plan throughout the year, especially what happens to you taxably throughout the year, that's going to determine if you should do pre-tax or Roth. So I'm not telling you should do one or the other. Both are great in certain circumstances. But first, even just figuring out, can I do both? And another thing, let's say you have both options, pre-tax or Roth, right? So one's going to grow tax-free, come out tax-free. The other's going to come out tax on ordinary income. Within that, a lot of people, because Roth is a newer tool than tax-deferred or pre-tax, a lot of people will, I can't tell you how many times people have said, well, I won't get the match if I add in Roth, because it made sense for them to do Roth, or they wanted to do Roth, right? Well, I won't get the match if I don't add in Roth.
Yeah, we've even seen people who really like Roth. Maybe they're putting 11% into their 401k and their company matches 3%. Well, look at a pay stub and it's like, oh, 8% Roth, 3% pre-tax. Oh, why are you doing that? Well, I won't get the match if I don't put that money into pre-tax. But wait, but you wanted to do Roth,
Yeah. And again, we're not saying what's right or wrong here. It's just, they truly believe that they will not receive the employer's free money to them if they don't, add in a particular way. Well, it's like, well, then why are these options? Why are they there? And so anyhow, an employer is matching a contribution. They're not matching a contribution type, right? So my contribution is going, let's say in this scenario, into Roth. That doesn't exclude me from the match because they're matching my contribution. I'm putting in my 11%. Okay, then I get the 3%. It's just that 3%, in this case, let's say it's going into the pre-tax bucket, right? If your employer isn't going to pay your taxes for you, right? So they put their 3% in the pre-tax portion of the 401k instead of the Roth. Although, that's newly this year they have the ability to put it in the Roth if your employer is doing that, but let's not go there. So your employer is matching that contribution, that amount versus a type, right? They're not discriminating and saying, oh, if you add into one of these two buckets, you do or don't get the match. So
Right. Yeah. So mistake here is not realizing the flexibility you have available to you. You're not tied to pre-tax. And I think even just to make sure we put a fine point on the pre-tax versus Roth, the mistake isn't adding in one versus the other. The mistake is not knowing why you're doing one or the other. So it might make sense for you to do pre-tax. It might make sense for you to do Roth. Maybe it'll even make sense to do a combination of both. We'd have to know your circumstances. And the mistake is not making an informed decision based on your circumstances.
right, you just heard someone say that you think is smart, that this is what they're doing, and now that whole circle of conversation at your workplace is that's what they're doing, so you just did that.
Yeah, water cooler financial advising doesn't turn out as well as professional financial advising in our experience.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And so know your options there. Also, if you work at a lot of these big tech companies that were getting more ingrained into offer what's called the mega backdoor. So not only pre-tax and Roth, but then an after-tax option. So that's the mega part of your 401k being able to actually go up to the full IRS limit, not just the basics, single standard 23,500.
Yep. So this year, 23,500, that's what most people think of as the limit. That's a reasonable thought, right? But most people don't realize the actual IRS limit on contributions to a retirement account is 70,000 this year in 2025. It's just that most people don't actually have buckets and opportunities to put more money in. So this mega backdoor is a really graceful way, if you will, to be able to add a lot more money into retirement accounts which are tax advantaged.
Right. So if your 401k has this after tax option, above and beyond getting up to that full IRS limit, so what you add in, what your employer adds in, etc. This is something that you'd want to one know about. But two, common mistake, people don't add into it correctly, or they let it sit in, the after tax space, or they mess up a conversion. That's a lot of words, so let me just back it up. There's this mega bucket and they can add to it, but there's also this backdoor or strategy involved in how you'd even want to use that tool. And for a lot of people, a common mistake is, well, I just start putting in money, because I just want to save more money, which is great. Love those people. But depends on how you're using that
Hmm.
extra space in your 401k.
Yeah. Yeah, this one, it's almost painful to talk about, and we have seen it where well-meaning people with extra income are trying to do the responsible thing, right? The mistake they're making isn't contributing more, it's contributing more inefficiently, or in the case of after tax with a mega backdoor, failing to convert to Roth, in which case, say you put 10,000 into after tax, or how about 100,000, and it grows to 120,000, you owe tax on all of that growth. Whereas if you had put it into Roth, that 20,000 of growth would be tax free. That's a really big delta. So it's a big mistake if people are adding and not converting.
Yeah, or they, oh crap, I didn't press this button, on my portal, and I'm not doing immediate in-plan conversions. I'll just do it now, convert it now into Roth, because really there's generally not a lot of value to just have money sit in after tax, which a lot of people just have their money just sitting in after tax because they just want to save money they didn't know. But that said, then they catch this mistake and then they're like, oh, I got to do this conversion to Roth now. Suddenly their tax bill that year is
Uh,
very large and they're very unhappy.
yeah. Yeah. Generally, if you see the word conversion pop up, maybe pump the brakes, talk to somebody about it. Don't click too fast.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Then another thing that comes to mind is just in general, not understanding So we're talking about the tax wrappers within the 401k and the different doors and the different buckets, but within that, the underlying investment funds and just understanding what are my options. A lot of times people will just kind of sign up, get put in a target date or a life cycle fund, or maybe even have an advisor managing it and they have no idea what fee they're paying for that,
Mhm.
or they don't know the expense ratio of all the different funds, or that there even are options outside of, the life
Totally.
cycle funds or a brokerage link option, right? And so it's just what's available, what are the fund lineup options, and are there more within a brokerage link or just past the life cycle funds that I have available? And then what how does that line up with my other investments, but also what's the cost? Because a lot of times people, because they just don't want to look at are sitting in, a more expensive, possibly historically less returning fund than the other options that they actually have available.
Yep. So yeah, mistake is simply not knowing what your options are, much less, I mean, or helping people actually make efficient use of their 401k investments. But yeah, a lot of times people just haven't even taken the first step, right? Again, kind of back to the old corporate, adage, like you're not really, you know, you're not, compensated. Your job isn't set to make sure that your 401k is efficiently invested in and avoiding unnecessary at times fees. So yeah, mistake to not pay attention to this and not at least know your options.
Yeah. And the last one that comes to mind, but is actually really common, especially for our high income earners, just maxing out too soon. What I mean by that is you're filling up your 401k throughout the year and you've maxed out the amount that you can even put in by, mid-year, right? And why that's a mistake. I mean, I'm so glad you're saving money, but it's just really inefficient for a couple reasons. One, maxing out throughout the year allows you to dollar cost average the best price of the market, right? Instead of I can think of actually recently, of a client who came to us and they had been doing this and we fixed it, but they were maxing out too soon, too soon, too soon. And then, they bought the market, and then mid-year, they had already added what they could add into the 401k, and then the market dropped, and that's exactly when you want to be buying, right? It dropped in the fall and they missed the opportunity to even buy because they had maxed out. So again, dollar cost averaging the best price throughout the year, just strategic level contributions. And then another client I can think of too, this was really sad. So they came to us and we're reviewing their statements, all these documents, tax return, 401k statement, all this stuff. And we're looking and we're saying, oh, this was unique. But same thing, client was maxing out their 401k too soon. They got their bonuses going in, they got their contributions, and anyhow, they can't add any more throughout the year. Well, unfortunately, their employer stopped matching for half the year. So they were adding and but that employer, they need that contribution to match, right? So they got about half the match.
Mm,
So they're missing out on free money, they're missing out on dollar cost averaging. In general, it's just really inefficient.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think when you're not in the 401k world, a lot of times you assume that every 401k should be identical, and it's absolutely not. So this employer had their the mechanics, their back end mechanics set up such that if the employee wasn't contributing, the employer wasn't contributing. Again, that doesn't happen, super frequently, but it can happen where, they left about half their match on the table, just because of that. So really unfortunate. So to summarize then our mistakes that we see people make most often, mistake number one, not knowing why you're contributing to either Roth or pre-tax or not making an informed decision about it. Number two, contributing to pre-tax just to get the match. Doesn't mean pre-tax is a bad idea for you, but don't contribute to pre-tax just because you think that's what you need to do to get the match. That's not the case. Number three, trying to be a super saver if you've got the mega backdoor available to you, putting money into after tax and not converting it, or yeah, not having a strategy for what you're going to do with those funds.
Or not looking for in-plan conversions if you don't have the mega backdoor.
100%. Number four, not knowing what fund options are available to you and what you are paying to be invested the way that you are. And then number five, as we were just saying, maxing out too soon, leaving dollar cost averaging efficiency on the table, and in a worst case scenario, losing out on free money that your employer would otherwise give you in their match.
Yes, exactly. Okay, listen to this once, twice, and go look at your 401k and drop a comment in our comment section if this was helpful.